What would you do if you found your husband, the man you just married, showering with another woman right there in the bedroom you share while you're 6 weeks pregnant? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply looked down at the two pairs of wet slippers, hers stacked neatly over mine like they'd always belonged there. And I hadn't. I'd only come home because I'd forgotten a file. I was supposed to grab it and head straight back to the office in time for a meeting. But something felt strange from the moment I stepped into the alley. No TV sounds. No mother-in-law laughing loudly on the phone. Just a silence too intentional, like the house had pressed itself flat against the walls trying to hide something. Her car was parked in the driveway, Elise, the nurse who once cared for Daniel after the accident. At first I assumed she'd dropped by to say hello, but in the middle of the day, unannounced, parked, like she lived there. I pushed open the front door and called out softly, "Just grabbing my papers, I'll be quick." No reply. In the kitchen, my mother-in-law was flipping meat in a pan. She startled when she saw me, then quickly composed herself. "Why are you back so early?" she asked, eyes on the stove. "Forgot a file. Just going upstairs to grab it," I said. She stepped toward the staircase. "It's messy up there. Let me bring it down." "I know exactly where it is. 2 minutes." I walked past her before she could say anything else. As I reached the top step, a familiar scent hit me, the soft floral soap I kept only in our bathroom. I hadn't been home all day. Who used it? Then I opened the bedroom door. There she was, Elise, bending slightly, dabbing a towel along Daniel's shoulders. His skin was damp. So was hers. Steam lingered in the air like it hadn't yet decided whether to disappear. They laughed. Not loudly, not wildly. Just enough for it to sound like they'd done this before. I didn't enter the room. Didn't back away either. I stood still like a forgotten photograph in a home that had already moved on. Daniel froze. Elise slowly pulled the towel back, calm, almost graceful. Her eyes didn't flinch. She stepped behind him, not hiding, not rushing, like nothing about this needed explaining. Behind me, my mother-in-law came upstairs, still holding the pot of soup. She didn't look shocked, just tired. "You would have found out sooner or later," she said, as though infidelity was something scheduled, and I had merely arrived on time. Daniel couldn't meet my eyes. His lips moved slightly, but the words were small, weak. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I looked down. My gray slippers, damp, forgotten, pressed beneath Elise's clean white ones. Water pooled around them in quiet circles, as if the floor itself knew what had happened before I did. That room was no longer mine. Maybe it never had been. I walked back downstairs. No one followed. The meat was burning in the pan. I didn't care. I packed whatever I could grab: clothes, files, some cash. My mother-in-law stood near the door like she wanted to stop me. But this time, she said nothing. Neither did I. What needed to be said was already written on all their faces. Outside, the sun was still bright. The sky blue as ever. But something inside me had turned. A quiet change of season no one could see but me. At the corner of the street, I turned to look back. That house, once a promise of new beginnings after 6 years of shared lunches and cheap wedding vows, was now just a shell. Whatever I thought love looked like, I had mistaken for habit. Whatever I believed was real, I had carried alone. I hailed a cab to the office. Don't remember what I said to the driver. Didn't matter. At work, people were laughing, talking, eating. I went straight to the bathroom, locked. The stall turned on the faucet and sat on the cold tile floor. Back then, I didn't know I was pregnant. I only knew something inside me had gone very quiet. And I didn't know if it would ever come back. I found out I was pregnant a week later. When I held the ultrasound in my hand, I thought the doctor had made a mistake. I hadn't even caught my breath from the wreckage of my marriage, and now I was standing in front of a new beginning I hadn't asked for. 6 weeks, which meant it had happened during the honeymoon, the same week Daniel held me under the sunlight by the sea, whispering names for our future children. I stepped out of the clinic and stood under the hospital's awning for what felt like hours. The sky was overcast, but inside me the sun burned sharp. I didn't know whether to feel grateful or shattered, whether I was meant to be a mother or just someone clinging to a version of love that no longer existed. That night, I sat in a rented room no bigger than 10 square meters. A place I'd found in a hurry. The walls smelled of old rain, the paint chipped at the corners. I stared at the ultrasound again. The light above me flickered soft and yellow. 6 weeks. Just a black dot. Tiny. No shape, barely anything at all, and yet somehow it felt like the only thing holding me together. There were moments I thought of letting go. Not because I didn't want the baby, because I was terrified. No home, no family nearby, no one waiting at the door after work. Just a body that ached, a crib I couldn't afford, a hunger I wasn't sure how to feed. But sometime after midnight, when the city had gone quiet, I placed my hand over my belly and whispered, "If you want to stay, I'll try." And that was the beginning. I didn't tell Daniel, didn't tell his family either. I wasn't ready to offer that kind of truth to the people who had thrown me out without hesitation. Instead, I rearranged my life. I kept my day job, took on late-night writing gigs for a small local journal Rachel, my best friend, had introduced me to. She was the first person I told. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just squeezed my hand and said, "You won't go through this alone." And she meant it. Every week she showed up with food. Sometimes an old maternity shirt. Sometimes just a pale pink lipstick. "You look too washed out," she'd joke. "Even single moms deserve to feel pretty." For the first time in days, I laughed. I remembered I wasn't just a body carrying a child. I was still a woman. Still human. Then one day, my mother-in-law called my office. Her voice was still sharp, but there was something cooler now. More calculated. "I heard you moved out," she said. "Let's get the divorce over with." I looked up from my screen and answered calmly, "I'm pregnant." Silence. A full 5 seconds. Then, "Is it Daniel's?" I let out a quiet laugh. Who else would it be? She didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask about the baby. She just launched into a string of reasons why I shouldn't keep it. "You don't have a house. No financial stability. You can't raise a child like this." Then colder. "Don't you think it's selfish?" I kept my voice level. What's selfish is throwing out a pregnant woman, then trying to claim the child like it's property. When the court summons came, I stood completely still. Not shocked. Just hollow. Daniel's family had filed for custody. Their case claimed I was emotionally unstable, financially incapable, and unfit to be a mother. It wasn't the betrayal that crushed me. It was having to prove again that I was worth something, that I deserved to raise my own child. I called Rachel. She didn't speak at first. Then she said quietly, "Okay, from now on, I'm your witness." She took me to see a lawyer, Hannah, a quiet woman in her early 40s, who didn't blink through my story. "You've got something they don't," she said. "You didn't give up. You work. You're grounded. They may have money, but you have the truth. If you're willing to see this through, they won't win easily." I nodded. Not because I was sure of victory, but because there was no other choice. I started documenting everything. Every prenatal appointment, every meal, sleep patterns, rent receipts, work contracts. I turned my life into evidence. Not to fight, but to protect the life growing inside me. I started calling the baby Noah. He didn't know anything about this world yet, but I did. And I knew if I fell, there would be no one left to catch either of us. I never imagined a custody petition could feel this cold. No name for the child, no concern for well-being. Just numbers, diagnoses, legal jargon, and judgments. They labeled me the financially unfit mother with a psychological history indicating instability, and concluded I could not provide a suitable nurturing environment. I used to believe that if you lived kindly, the world would be kind in return. But this lawsuit reminded me in a battle that isn't fair kindness alone won't win. My lawyer Hannah told me to stay calm, but inside, there was no space left for calm. I had tried every day, every night to document everything, to live straight, to work hard. Yet somehow, they could erase it all with a single line. The mother currently resides in temporary housing without support from family. Rachel, of course, was the first to speak when she saw me frozen in place after reading the documents. You didn't survive all this just to sit here crying over a few sheets of paper. You're his mother, Claire. No one gets to take Noah from you. So we started gathering every small truth we could. Freelance writing contracts, grocery bills, prenatal checkups, photos of simple meals nutritious though modest, daily work logs, even encouraging messages from readers after I'd begun quietly sharing pieces of my single motherhood journey in a small online group. Hannah told me, "You're not just raising a child, you're living honestly, and that matters." But the other side wasn't done. Daniel's family sent more legal threats. One afternoon, I saw Elise, the woman who once stood in my bedroom drying off with my towel at the bottom of the stairs, phone in hand, secretly recording as I walked outside with my pregnant belly. Another evening I came home and found superglue in the lock. The landlord showed me a clip from the security camera. A man in a raincoat had stood at my door for nearly 20 minutes. He didn't try to break in. He just stood there. Rachel came over that same night. She didn't say much. She looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, "They want you scared. If you get scared, they win." I nodded. My hand still shook, but my heart had started to harden. On our first court day, I brought nothing but a copy of the ultrasound and a folder of photographs, soft, blurry images of my life with Noah. Breakfasts with peanut butter toast. My hand resting on my belly. The wooden crib I built late one night with trembling fingers. Across the aisle, my former mother-in-law arrived in a luxury suit, arms full of printed savings statements, photos of the family estate bank records, and a lawyer whose voice was crisp and polished. "My client wishes to secure the child's future in a stable, loving environment," the attorney said. "The current mother has a past diagnosis of depression and is now living alone without familial support." I stood. My voice wavered at first, but my eyes stayed steady. "I don't have a big house. I don't have much money. But I have the one thing a child needs most: real love. I didn't keep this baby because I wasn't afraid. I kept him because I couldn't abandon him, not the way adults abandon each other." The judge didn't rule that day, but the hearing was enough to light a spark. Days later, a small article appeared on a women's news site and went viral. It didn't name me, didn't mention theirs, but everyone understood. A single mother being sued for custody while the baby was still in the womb. On the other side, a wealthy family with power status, and a woman known to have intruded into a recovering marriage. The comments poured in: anger, sympathy, hope. No one knew who I was, but everyone wanted to know, would Noah stay with his mother? Rachel read the comments out loud to me. Her voice cracked. "You know what someone wrote? That after reading your story, they decided to keep their baby." I couldn't speak. I just placed my hands over my stomach. Noah kicked gently. Just when it seemed the tide was shifting, Elise returned. I was working at a small bookstore when she walked in, white blouse, arms full of flowers and a box of pastries. "Claire," she smiled. "I heard you're expecting. I came to say congratulations." I didn't look at the flowers. I looked her straight in the eye. "No one's filming. You can drop the act." She kept smiling, but her eyes weren't soft this time. "I'm not acting. I just came to remind you, even if you keep the baby, his last name will still be Daniels, and I wouldn't mind raising him as my own." I set the book I was shelving back on the counter and said quietly, "You can take my husband. You can win over his mother, but the child in my belly you'll never touch. I'd rather die than let him go." She froze, then handed me a thin file before leaving. Inside was a copy of my old psychological records: the miscarriage, the depression, the sleepless nights I thought I'd buried years ago now laid bare like a blade to the chest. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at my reflection, pale, thin, exhausted, but my eyes hadn't lowered. I called Hannah. My voice didn't tremble this time. "I want to countersue. They accessed my records illegally, and if I have to, I'll go public. I have nothing left to lose." She paused, then said softly, "If you push back, there's no turning around." I replied, "I'm not looking to turn back. I just want to keep Noah." I gave birth to Noah on a morning laced with misty rain. At 3 a.m., a sharp pain jolted me from restless sleep. My water broke pooling across the tile floor, soaking through my old slippers like an urgent whisper. It's time. My hands trembled as I called for a car. My legs buckled, but I still placed a hand over my belly as if to apologize. The car arrived quickly. The driver didn't say a word, just opened the door. I slid in, gripping my stomach, breathing through the pain, repeating a single thought over and over. Hold on, Noah, I'll get you somewhere safe. The hospital was cold. Fluorescent lights glared off the ceiling. A nurse asked if anyone was with me. I shook my head. It's just me. They hesitated but led me in anyway. IV fluids, fetal monitoring, quiet reminders to breathe. It hurt, deep, crushing waves that twisted through bone. But between contractions, I whispered his name like a prayer. Noah, don't leave me. For over 5 hours, I battled through the pain alone. Or so I thought, until a hand took mine from behind. Warm, steady, familiar. I opened my eyes. It was Mrs. Whitmore, my ex-mother-in-law. She said nothing, just sat beside me holding my hand. Her eyes shone with tears. I didn't have the strength to ask when she'd arrived. I just held on, clinging to her hand like the last lifeline in open water. When Noah cried for the first time, I broke into tears, not from pain, but release. As if every weight I'd carried for months had finally been lifted. They placed him on my chest, a small, trembling, red body. I gasped. My hands still shaking closed tightly around him. Hi there, I whispered. Mama's here. Mrs. Whitmore stood beside us, covering her mouth as tears ran down her cheeks. A moment later, she asked softly, May I hold him? I nodded. She reached out with hands that trembled like a first-time mother's. She didn't look at me when she said, I'm sorry for trying to take him from you. I didn't reply, didn't nod, didn't look away. I just watched her cradle Noah, 3 women once divided, now bound by something neither side could deny. I named him Noah. It means light after the storm, the one thing in my life that came late, but right on time. We left the hospital on a gentle, sunny afternoon. I carried Noah back to the same tiny room that had witnessed my nausea, my loneliness, my tears. Nothing had changed except for the crib in the corner, a few baby onesies, and the faint scent of powder in the air. I had nothing new, just a new reason to live. Noah cried through the night. I rocked him half asleep long before sunrise. Some nights I'd just gotten him down when a passing motorcycle startled him awake again. I'd sit against the wall, eyes red, holding him close. Just one night, baby, I whispered, so Mama can go to work tomorrow. But Noah didn't understand. He cried. He needed milk. He needed me. And somehow I never wanted to give up. Just waking up and seeing his tiny hand resting in mine, that was enough to keep going. Then came the call from Hannah. Custody is officially yours. Elise is barred from contact. Daniel's family didn't appeal. I sat in silence for a long time, not with joy. Just a long, quiet breath, like stepping out of a dark room no one knew I'd been locked in. I kept writing. What began as diary entries became full essays on pregnancy, on giving birth alone, on loving a child you hadn't even seen yet. The posts spread farther than I imagined. One message read, Because of your story, I kept the baby. I'm no longer afraid to be a single mom. I didn't respond. I just set my phone down and watched Noah sleep beside me, the child who once brought me pain, now the reason I existed. Mrs. Whitmore began to visit. Not often, but enough for me to know she was learning how to be family again. She no longer called me daughter-in-law. She didn't say mom, but each visit she left something: a pot of porridge, a bag of baby clothes, small things that spoke louder than words. Once placing a hand gently on the crib, she whispered, I've made so many mistakes, but if he grows up safe and happy, I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. I said nothing, but I understood. Sometimes we forgive not because they deserve it, but because we deserve the peace. A year later, I was invited to speak at a conference on single mothers' rights. I stood in front of hundreds. No makeup. A simple white dress. From the crowd, Rachel clapped so loudly I thought she might scream. I'm so proud of you. In the last row, I saw Daniel. He stood still, baseball cap pulled low. He didn't wave, didn't cry. He didn't look angry or sorry, just like someone watching the person he'd once had move forward without needing him anymore. I didn't avoid his gaze, just nodded gently. We had once been everything to each other. Now we were simply the past. That night, I lay next to Noah. He could say mama now. He reached for hugs, buried his face in my chest when startled. I placed my hand over his heart and whispered, "Do you know something, Noah? I used to fear you'd be born into nothing. But now I know. As long as I have you, I have everything." If you've ever doubted your strength to be a mother alone, maybe it's just because you haven't yet felt your baby's heartbeat under your hand. Because once you do, every fear becomes the very reason you keep going. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. And if somewhere in your life you've ever had a Noah, ever weathered a storm, and kept walking, then you are not alone. We mothers don't need permission to love. We just need to know we are.